for the kids, they're moving on, and then to be able to, you know, for them to always feel like they can come back is great, but, you know, they do move on. I mean, I've had kids graduate that I thought were gonna be, you know, back visiting all the time, and I haven't seen, I mean, some of them live in Concord and don't see them that often, and kind of wonder what happened, where the connection was lost at some point. So, it's emotional from both aspects. I can only imagine what this coach was going through, trying to start a program in a, you know, school where everybody said you're lucky if you get 1 or 2 kids. And he put together a team and managed to get a couple to qualify and be state place winners. You know, but again, he was young. He was trying to replace his own addictions, and so I think there was a lot of aspects of that, you know, need to be recognized as well.
I wanted to add, because I get I get additional information when these films are given to us, and I watched a webinar with the filmmakers. I did not know that it was 2 women doing this at the time, and they described the process. They got, you saw what they got, because those families got so comfortable. They were there for everything. And they mentioned that the scene where Jaquan leaves Jamario's party and he gets arrested, the police pull him over, they had footage that showed that his taillights were not dimmed. That was just, the police were waiting on that dead-end street just for somebody to leave the house. That was totally unjust. And they took the footage to the mother and said, do you want to use it? And she said no. She wanted the support of him being on probation, because she felt like he had to learn, and he had to learn a big lesson. And I thought that was an amazingly cool thought, that she tough parenting. But single moms, they all need it. And the other thing that I did today was I read about the Huntsville schools. They closed this one down, but they have been in an absolute mess, where at the time this was, they mentioned it at the beginning, but at the time that this is going on, that J.O. Johnson's high school was still under a 1970 desegregation rule, and had not complied, and what's happened since is a bunch of that population and a bunch of other ones have been combined, but it meant also the teachers had to be taken out of all of their schools and rearranged to also meet desegregation guidelines, and it's just been a horrendous mess. And there's a few hopeful voices in it, parents who are saying things are getting better, but it's really very difficult. The other comment that I was going to make is that here in Concord, having been the mother of a now 31-year-old, but a son who is not always an angel, that there are great cops in the mix in Concord, but we always advised my son to be incredibly restrained. And he had a good friend who was not only Iraqi, but named Hussein. And we used to tell Hussein, don't you dare be caught in the car with anything. And he was constantly in trouble too, but I don't know, how do you deal with student athletes that might need good advice?
So even the drug, the marijuana, the way they got caught, it happens in Bow, it happens in Concord. I know student athletes already on my own team that couldn't wait to smoke pot as soon as states was over, and they did. And it's the same. When I say like I saw similarities, it's not just the wrestling, it's the thought process. It's the high school thought process of, I've been just busting my ass for the last 6 months. and keeping clean. I can't wait to smoke pot after state. That's what they were, for the birthday, and then they were gonna smoke after state. And that was their game plan. And it's, it's the same thing. And, when I first moved to Bow, I'm originally from Pennsylvania. When I first moved to Bow, someone came up to me and said, "You're coaching at Bow?" I said, "Yeah." They're like, "Well, they're just a bunch of little, they're a bunch of rich little white kids. I don't know how you're going to create a wrestling team there." And so my first day of practice at Bow, I pulled in the parking lot and I had a little Red Ranger, and this kid came in next to me and it was a brand new, like F-250, and he got out and he's like, "Mine's bigger." So, all right. So I'm like, well, that person's really onto something. So I went into wrestling practice and I got my shoes on, and don't you know who walks through the door but that kid? So he's on the wrestling team. But we also have the same, and it's not a whole nother level, but Bow's a really small town compared to Manchester or Concord. We're right next door, but we have police there that watch certain kids, that watch certain houses, because they already have a bad reputation. So it's at a different level, but it's the same struggles. It's just at a different level.
I would say that in Concord, I would say at least a third of our team now is either refugee or minority basis, and you hear it from them. They talk about it, whether it's with police, whether it's where they live in their communities, and that the police are patrolling through and looking, and they don't see that in other parts. Whether you hear it from as far as how they feel about teachers. Heck, there are kids who talk about just being on the wrestling team. Some teachers don't like the fact that some teachers don't like the fact that they're on sports teams, and they hold it against them. And the biggest thing we can do is, it's the same thing with the mental health aspect is, better education, and those teachers being more aware of being culturally sensitive and being aware that, they need to just simply, you can't hold a grudge against a kid just because, he's 16, he's making a stupid decision. It doesn't matter the color of his skin. I can't say that that's going to be the way that Montgomery, Alabama is. I've never been down there, so I don't know. But I guess all you can do is hope that, people can be more educated about that. And as you said, tell the kids to be as respectful and polite as possible at all times, and, work really hard not to get caught, obviously doing something wrong that they shouldn't be. Not saying they're going to be perfect, but, if they do get caught doing something, they definitely have to, be as forthcoming about it and as honest and respectful as possible. Want to hear from the resident kid or not?
Let's see what the kid has to say.
As a teammate, I know a bunch of our wrestlers screwed up, and we've all had to do stuff to help them out, and it's tough. I mean, a bunch of them got suspended, and it really hurts the team when they mess up, because we have to fill holes in the lineup, and it's just hard to win when you don't have a very big team to start, and somebody messes up, so it affects the whole team.
I think that there's a couple different ways to approach when that individual does mess up. A lot of it depends on the individual. You can't just by reading body language, reading personalities. I think people are going to react to different how you come after them differently. So you have to, and that's part of growing as a coach, I think, and learning as a coach. Because when I was first started coaching, I was 22 and I was a meathead. I would just say, you could say everything to the same person, but you can't coach everyone the same way either. So you gotta learn that on your own. And so to answer your question, like, what would you say to? It really depends on the student athlete. Some you could go out and wrestle them in a schoolyard and beat them up for a little bit. Some you have to take them out to dinner and have a serious conversation with them. Whatever the path that gets through to them, and say, hey, let you know, you're making a mistake. You have the rest of your life to smoke marijuana if you want to. You want to be 40 years old, you want to sit in the bar, and you want to smoke marijuana, then that's your choice. But right now, there's 10 other guys on this team, 13 other guys on this team that need you, and you can't be high. And you have to be in shape, and if you're not going to do it for yourself, at least do it for them. You know, there's so many different ways to approach it. It really just depends on the person.
I would be curious to know in the movie, as soon as the police officer pulled over and started talking, you know, I think a couple of the other boys were like, it's about to be some, you know, Black Lives Matter stuff. So how often does this happen down there? That's what they jump right to. I mean, we've had a couple kids where, you know, one of our former wrestlers came back and helped coach this year, and then he ended up becoming a police officer, and a couple of kids on the team right away were like, oh, Black Lives Matter. Like, that's the first thing they said to him, is because and it's like, he's been here for the past 6 months, and he's been nothing but great to all of you, but now that he's a police officer, you're gonna jump right to that. You know, I think sometimes it's unfair on both sides. And I'm not gonna say that it's a fair fight or that it's not warranted, but, you know, I think both groups can jump to conclusions on that matter.
Good question.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that with the level of stuff that some of these kids were doing that you would have kept them on their team? Or do you think maybe he was more lenient because of the documentary crews? Because I can tell you right now, with my high school coach, no way Teague finishes the season. There's 0% chance. And you know, even the 2 kids who got arrested, I feel like my coach would have chucked them pretty fast. We weren't in a Huntsville, Alabama situation down there, but you know, we had troubled kids. You know, we weren't a rich town, we weren't a totally poor town. We had a good mix, and that's just kind of, you know, when do you cut the cord? Because that was, you know, I saw several of my team. I saw kids get thrown off for much lesser things than that. You know, on wrestling and football, but yeah, especially my wrestling coach. He was pretty, and now granted he was young, like Brock was saying, he was 22, I was 18, he was 22, so just seeing that kind of pretty much zero tolerance coaching, and then seeing something like this, and I'm just like, you know, we even had in Connecticut state rules, like, you know, a kid who got arrested for smoking pot would not be on the wrestling team because of an actual state bylaw, no discretion with the coach whatsoever, you know, not that my coach would have had it.
Sure. So I think to answer your question, a lot of it comes down to, I think every year would be different for me, and I think every year has been different for me into how I handle the situations. There is a little bit of a gray area with the school and what the school rules are. So a first offense, you miss 4 events. The next offense, you miss a whole year. And then the third offense, you can't play more sports. So some of it is out of our hands. Not that we don't do our own internal investigation and consequences and stuff like that. A lot of it depends on, you know, some of wrestlers on my team specifically over the last couple of years. Wrestling is the only sport they did. It's the only thing they had, and if you take them off the team, if you kick them off the team, they're just going to get into more trouble, because at least the wrestling room was a place that they could come work out. You could try to mentor them because they're under your guidance, and you're almost doing them a disjustice by kicking them out of the room, even though that's probably what should happen, because it's not fair to the rest of the people that are there busting their ass. So I think it just depends on what message you're trying to send across, and you know how willing you are to get that student athlete to be successful on and off the mat. And you know, Tony and I, you know, Nick Zeras and I talk a lot, and we go through a lot of the same things. And I'm telling you, everything that happened down in Alabama happens in Concord, happens in Bow, happens in Newport, and I think it really just, you know, you ping pong it back and forth with the other coaches, and you look to see what message you want to send to that kid. I mean, if the student athlete is a cancer on the team and it's negative, and he or she's constantly dragging the team down, then yeah, you know what, this is an opportunity for me to get rid of you. because you're a problem. But if they're a big support group and they just made a mistake and they are well when they're going with the team, you know, there's so many different ways to look at it. So I think it's a case-by-case scenario.
I would just like to add, I do think it is case by case. The coach even admitted in this, he sees a lot of himself in Teague, and people didn't give up on him. So I don't think he wants to give up on Teague. I think Teague wasn't necessarily a cancer. I don't think he was dragging other kids from on the team down with him to smoke dope and everything. I think he was doing a lot of it on his own. You know, I think if he, and I believe he was a freshman, so it wasn't, you know, I think the coach was just trying to give him more opportunities, more chances, and again, didn't want to kick him off, because if he's not on the team, then he's definitely, that's all he's doing every day after school. That's what he's spending his Saturdays doing. At least if he's on the team, he's spending his Saturdays stuck in a gym, and he's not doing that, you know, while he's there. So, you know, it is, I also think as a young coach, you know, a young coach who was trying to get kids to place in the state tournament and everything like that, there's a lot of young coaches, and I don't know if Brock was this way, but I know a lot of young coaches, when you come out, you know, when you're 22, 23, the first thing you're thinking is, how can I prove that I'm a good coach? I need to get kids placing in states, I need to win states, I need to, and you learn over time that it's more important to raise good young men on your team than to be worrying about winning. But it takes years and experience for that to occur. And so, I don't know if he was there yet, you know, in all his experiences and all the, you know, chances he got over the years. I think he wants to keep doing that. I think he knows the situation at the school, that it wasn't a great situation, and he wanted to give these kids more of an opportunity.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's kind of two aspects to that, and I certainly remember, you know, coaches that I played for and then coached under and was groomed under, who were, you know, that kind of hardcore old school kind of coach. And I think there's two things. I think one thing is times have changed, certainly. I think a lot of times that type of message doesn't carry over. Oftentimes it's at odds with other messages that kids are receiving, so it's a delicate way to go. But I also think it matters what are the other support systems. That, going back to what you guys are talking about, you know, in this case, these are kids who there is nothing else for them, and in a lot of ways, this wrestling team is maybe saving lives. And so you're wary about cutting that kid loose, and then that weighs on you, and you're not doing your best as a coach because you're worried about what the hell's Teague doing now because he's not in my room. So that's part of it too, and I think depending on the circumstances in your school, like you said, generally you can go almost with the community, but of course every community has every facet within it. And I think that has to be part of what informs your decisions when you're going there with those kids. You know, if you're the only bright light in that kid's day, then maybe you got to find a way to keep working with them and send them that message that you're still supporting them and you're still with them. Sometimes though you have to cut them loose and then find other ways to still be there for that kid even though they're not in your room because they've just done something that's, like you said, if you're in Connecticut, it's not even your choice, it's done for you. And a lot of states and a lot of districts will do that to relieve the coach of having to make that moral decision, you know, which in a lot of ways can be really nice.
Just think your commentary on this is really interesting relative to coaches and interacting with kids. And what I'm taking away from what you're saying is that kids are kids, you know, wherever they might be. The challenge is that something you just mentioned. I mean, these kids don't have a lot of models that are positive